A D N.
It's HeadphonesNeil!
What's up, guys, and welcome back to HeadphonesNeil Reviews. I'm your host, as always, HeadphonesNeil, bringing you a rather filled set of reviews for this particular week. So I'm going to get some of the miscellaneous reviews out of the way first, and then we're going to do the GTA San Andreas gameplay update, and then we're going to round it out with all the Star Wars stuff for this week. So I'm going to start it off with The Walking Dead Dead City. So we had the Season 2 premiere this week called Power Equals Power. So basically it was kind of a recap, starting point of what everyone's been up to, notably Negan and Maggie. Maggie's been kind of living at home, dealing with her son, and I forgot his name already, but he's kind of going through his teenage years. She's trying to still be a good mom, but teach him stuff and all that. So, and then dealing with the Republic of people and all that, and that they want to go back into Manhattan to steal the ethanol or methane production facilities and all of that stuff. So that stuff was decent, and she it's kind of the whole Godfather quote of every time she tries to get back out, or every time she thinks she's out, they keep pulling her back in. So dealing with that. The more interesting side this week was the Negan side, because we have him talking to the lady and the Croat while being in prison and dealing with all that stuff. But ultimately, we get the return of Lucille, the baseball bat, and him trying to reunite the various factions, clans, whatever, in Manhattan, so that they can defend themselves against the attack that's coming. So he kind of goes back into the role of what he used to be as Negan, leader of the Saviors. So I'm kind of curious to see what changed his mind. Do they give him the power? Are they going to make this the end of his sentence if he pulls this off and all that? And then, as we'll find out, Lucille has gotten some upgrades, notably that is basically a shocking bat now. So if anyone touches it and it's on and all that, then they get shocked and zapped and that sort of thing. So pretty nifty thing, but it's good to see Negan pulling off, even if it's a parody of the role that he used to play as leader of the Saviors. I like him in this role. He plays it very convincingly, so I'm curious to see what they do with him, or in this particular role, what he does and all of that stuff. So overall, an interesting start. Didn't do too much. It's a season premiere. Just, catch everyone up, what everyone's been up to, and kind of set up the season for this attack that's coming. Otherwise, I also had a chance to watch Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, and Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. I ended up watching both of them just because I figured, The Wrath of Khan is the start of the trilogy, and then The Search for Spock is realizing that Spock's alive, dealing with the fallout of the Genesis project, and then the whole thing with the Klingons, which was particularly fun for me. Christopher Lloyd's performance was great throughout, so there's that. And then I figured, since I'm mostly there, why not round out how they're going to figure out how to get home now that they have Spock back and he's slowly regaining the remerging of his identity and memories and all of that. So the Voyage Home was interesting enough as far as dealing with the probe, having to go back in time to get whales, which that's pretty much the whole spectacularness of it all, which I'm not sure what's a harder pill to swallow, that or Spock's half-brother thinking he found God, and they have to go find this random nebula where Spock's brother thinks that he's found God. But that does bring us one of Kirk's best quotes, that what does God need with a starship, or what does God need with a spaceship? So if nothing else, that's what that film is good for. So for me, the films generally hold up, all three of them. So the more Star Trek of the three are Wrath of Khan and The Search for Spock. The Voyage Home, when you start dealing with time travel and all that, it gets kind of weird. And then they take the lady back, but then you deal with the whole time paradox and all that. So if anything, the best part of that film was Scotty talking to the computer, and then ending up having to use the keyboard. So all in all, a good trilogy of films. If you haven't seen them in a while, then I do definitely recommend watching those three as a full trilogy set of films and seeing if it holds up for you. So with that being said, as far as this week's Grand Theft Auto San Andreas stuff goes, we're continuing with the San Fierro story arc. So we're teaming up with Woozy to deal with the missions and the rival Triad gangs and all of that stuff. We end up meeting a pimp named Jizzy B. So for me, the Woozy stories I like a little bit better, but the Jizzy character is so funny and over the top that it's hard not to like him as well. So for me, I still enjoy the San Fierro stuff, but this is of course going as far as I got in my last gameplay, so it's hard to say if how the rest of the game holds up. But so far, I still love San Fierro. It's good to see it with the extra textures and upgraded visuals and all that stuff. Nothing to complain about as far as the AI goes. It pretty much still holds up. You still have to deal with the whole swimming thing, because even though you go to the gym in Los Santos, you still have to bulk up on your swimming abilities and being able to go underwater. Or in order to expand your lung capacity. So there is that with the boat mission, but it's easy to get by if you do that on its own. It's its own little project, so decent enough. But we're basically plugging away with the San Fierro part. So ultimately, once we get done with that, then we get to move on to the next sections of the game. But that's all I really got. Just the continuing gameplay is good. The San Fierro Woozy missions they still hold up as some of the best parts, and some of the good friendship that stemmed from the first part of the game in between Los Santos and the countryside areas. So with that being said, now we have the Star Wars stuff for this week. So a couple of things of note. So I started off with the watching of Star Wars Tales of the Underworld. So we have a split in this season between Asajj Ventress's story arc and Cad Bane. So they explain how she is still alive after Dark Disciple, and as it turns out, it's the doing of Mother Talzin. Ventress has the ability to either become one with the Force or go back and finish whatever stuff she wants to do as a living person. And so she ends up choosing that route. She meets up with a random Jedi kid on the run, thinking that because Quinlan is still alive, that maybe she'll go after him, but she decides to choose her own path. And so her story arc becomes the story of how she's going to end up being on her own, meeting up with the bounty hunters and dealing with all that stuff. So, she's kind of just a wild card living her own life, and she ultimately just wants the peaceful life, and that's about it. And then with the Cad Bane stuff, we actually get his origin story, that he used to live on the streets. He was hired by a bounty hunter and to start doing random missions instead of or like missions to make some real money instead of stealing for food all the time. And so we get the rise of that, losing his friend, going back to meet his friend, and realize times have changed. So he needs to do his own thing, and his friend needs to do his own. So it's kind of two separate story arcs where Asajj Ventress leaves her life behind as an assassin, but Cad Bane ultimately goes all in on his life and becomes one of the best notorious bounty hunters in the business. Overall, it's a decent set of stories. I got through it pretty quick. I think it's a net of only like an hour and 15 minutes, so it's literally only a matter of spending one evening on them, but super interesting story arcs. I like the Ventress stuff a little bit more, but the Cad Bane stuff was also interesting, just to see how he became a bounty hunter to begin with and how he got some of his mannerisms. So definitely worth watching all of that. So with that being said, for this week's trilogy of Andor episodes, so we have episode 7, Messenger, episode 8, Who Are You, and episode 9, Welcome to the Rebellion. Some of the best episodes to date for Andor and Star Wars in general. Andor keeps one-upping themselves week over week. Each week's episodes become even better than the last. So far it seems like the hype is worth it for season 2, that it is that intriguing and dramatic of a story arc. So with Messenger, it's one of those things where we see the continuing build out of Yavin base for the rebels. You see some of the structures going up. You see a lot of hubbub and activity. Cassian is there with Bix, and they're still trying to figure out their personal stuff, but also their friend, bringing missions and, things that they need to do out in the galaxy. Cassian is kind of in a funk because he's like, well, he wants to leave all that behind and live his own quiet life. But Bix is like, well, it's kind of a mirroring of, Han Solo and Kira from the Solo movie, that ultimately Cassian's going to do the right thing, but he's going to go this kind of roundabout way. So that's kind of what Messenger brings us. With episode 8, Who Are You? The thing at the end is kind of becomes a minimalist part of the whole story, that that agent kid who is married to the ISB agent ends up seeing Cassian, has him in his crosshairs, and Cassian realizes that this guy knows him and asks the title of the episode, Who Are You? But that underlies the whole premise of the story and the episode, that we get to see the actual events of the Gorman attacks, that we have the Empire there, we have all the citizens trying to do their uprising, doing a civil protest. It ultimately gets out of hand. They end up fighting this really, really big battle. A lot of people die. On the citizen side, a lot of people die. Everyone, is scared. Cassian is almost killed by that ISB guy, but ultimately ends up escaping because the rebels save him. So he's able to escape, but it jars him quite a bit as far as all the fighting and bloodshed that happens. On the Empire side, you have the overseer guy who's really pleased with all this, sends out the K2 unit or the K2SO units to help, with the unrest and try to bring some order to what's going on. But by the end of it, you see Deidre ultimately shooken up by it, either because now that her boyfriend lover guy is dead, but also because none of this is what she expected, especially after what her boyfriend guy tells her. But you see that it all ends up falling apart because it's not exactly what she intended. The Empire is, basically massacring people. They weren't just there to, or they were there to take the minerals and elements that they needed, but they're going to do it at any cost. So we see these events play out, and that is actually the bulk of the episode. So that ultimately sends up the next episode, Welcome to the Rebellion. So we have Mon Mothma giving her speech in the Senate, and so we have some critics trying to talk her down and outrageous and all that, but she does have a conversation with Bale that he wants her to give the speech but be ready to leave. They're going to have people there to get her out of there as soon as possible, because the Empire is going to come down on them really fast and really hard, and she's not going to be safe, especially since they need her for the war effort. As far as what he's going to do, he lets her know that he's going to stay behind and do what he can there. He has to help maintain the ruse, so in case anyone comes asking him questions and that sort of thing. So with that, so she gives her speech. It goes exactly how Bale said, and Cassian shows up to escort her away. They have to go escape. They end up killing the pilot, or Mon Mothma's pilot, who's the ISB plant. But they do end up getting away to the safe house, and we kind of leave it off there. But we get in the escape, we get Mon Mothma saying asking herself how she can do this, how are they going to move on, and Cassian tells her, welcome to the rebellion. So I think this is the turning point for him as far as staying in the rebellion, that it's not what they want to do, but they need the people there to do these sorts of things, because it's not going to be as easy and clean as they expect it to be. So I really can't wait to see what we get in the remaining episodes. My prediction is that we're going to have the tie out and connection to Rogue One, that we're going to end up going to Edu base. We're going to meet Galen, and he's going to give Bodhi the plans to escape on the cargo ship to get over to Saw Gerrera's base. And then I guess I'm kind of predicting more on the Empire and Death Star side, so we may not necessarily get a Tarkin, Vader, or Emperor cameo, but I think we are going to get more Krennic going to Edu, or we're going to get Krennic going to Edu to deal with that and that story arc, and that's at least one episode, but maybe more Death Star stuff. And potentially I figure we might get, Vader, Tarkin, and the Emperor doing some planning, so make that its own episode, that the Emperor is displeased with the progress of the Death Star and all the attacks. So he's going to send Tarkin to do everything for that, to tie it to Rogue One and let Vader know that they're in control, that Krennic's going to have to either go or be replaced or whatever, and all of that. So, I can see them setting up either a trilogy of episodes related to all this, or just, one or two of the 2-3 episodes, and then the rest of it's going to be setting up Yavin base, Bail and Mon Mothma setting up the rebellion at the Yavin base, and all of that stuff. But to round it out, and this is kind of a semi-related thing which I did see online, is once you watch these latest 3 episodes, go and watch the Star Wars Rebels episode Season 2, Episode 18, Secret Cargo. So this actually deals with some of the after effects of the Gorman attack, where Mon Mothma meets up at the Rebels to get her to Yavin Station, or Yavin Base, and she gives the speech that she's resigning from the Senate to join the rebellion. So part of me wonders, and I think this is a good point for this episode, that I think the final 3 episodes are going to either take place right after this, where Yellow Squadron rescues her and takes her to Yavin Base, or we're going to see her there, and they're going to make she's going to give some reference to it really quickly. It doesn't have to be anything spectacular or fantastic or anything like that, but I think they're going to make some connection to that. But I think the next set of episodes are going to be a year later, and they're going to be after her rescue to get her to Yavin Station. So with that being said, I really can't wait for these final 3 episodes. The Welcome to the Rebellion was nearly an hour long, so I imagine these final 3 episodes are going to be the same, where they're going to be like 50 minutes to an hour long each. So I'm really curious to see what they do, what kind of information they fill in and plan and all that. Are we going to see maybe even the Tantive 4, Princess Leia, or any of that stuff? But I'm kind of not sure what they're gonna do, but for me, that's kind of what I would expect, is that we're gonna spend a lot of time on the Empire side dealing with the Death Star, finally actually seeing that, potentially even a Emperor Palpatine speech. So even if we do go to Edu and see Galen and Bodhi, I think the biggest speech, or we're gonna get a big speech from the Emperor about the rebellion to the Senate, but then also with Tarkin and Vader in private to deal with it and do something along those lines, especially because in episode 4, when we learn from Tarkin that the Emperor has dissolved the that kind of happens after the destruction of Alderaan, I think, or right around that time. And now I need to rewatch episode 4 because I'm blanking on that, but I almost wonder if we're going to get a speech from the Emperor, either privately or publicly, to dissolve the Senate, because of the attacks on Gorman and Mon Mothma's speech, that because of this outrage and Mon Mothma's speech and all of that stuff, they can't use a misguided body because they don't know what they're talking about. So the Emperor is going to take full on control, and then that's why Tarkin tells the Council on the Death Star that the Emperor has dissolved the Senate and regional governors are now in place. So something along those lines to finally fill in those final bits of information to tie us to Rogue One and A New Hope. But with that being said, that's all for this particular episode. So for next week, at the moment, the usual Grand Theft Auto updates and reviews, and the series and season premiere or finale for Andor. And then for anything else that comes up, we'll see. I'll add that to the review. I'm not entirely sure of my schedule for the week, so we will have other stuff to talk about and review, but it all depends on how the week goes and all of that stuff. So with that being said, that's all there is for this particular episode. So if you have any questions, comments, feedback, the social media sites are linked on the website at HeadphonesNeil.reviews. The gameplay updates and audio version of the podcast are up on the YouTube channel at youtube.com/PatelN01, where you can now also become a member to give something back that way, get early access to content and all of that good stuff. So that's all at youtube.com/PatelN01. But that is all for this particular episode. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time.